Good evening, everyone. We have a quorum, and I'd like to get started. Alderman Wilson will not be joining us tonight. He'll be coming for the meeting later on, and I believe Alderman Braithwaite will be here very shortly. He was seen in the parking lot. This is the Monday, March 21st Rules Committee meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order, and the first item we have on our agenda is citizen comment. We have two speakers signed up, Matt Rogers, and then the second speaker is David Guan. Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
My name is Matt Rogers. I live at 133 Clyde Avenue. I am also chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Evanston. And I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak this evening. I stand before you to talk to you about the combination of various boards and committees, and in particular, the combination of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Plan Commission. And I am not trying to protect any turf here because I am ineligible to serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals come this June. I will term limit off. So this is not an attempt to try to keep my power. But more so to look at what the two boards do and how we can best keep both of them functioning to their capacity. We are one of the few boards that is written into the zoning ordinance or into any ordinance with our specific outline of our responsibilities and duties, some of which are decision-making abilities and some of which are recommendations to City Council. In 2015, we had 17 meetings with 41 cases, which included 18 special uses and 52 variations that we heard. The plan to combine the two boards together actually does not reduce anything in terms of staff workload. The work that we do is given to us by the citizens and the developers who want to come into this community. It is not work that we are creating for ourselves in order to try to justify our committee for existing. The combination of the two actually would increase the workload and the time commitment for individual board members. Currently, the Zoning Board of Appeals meets twice a month and Plan Commission usually meets once a month. And during that time, our meetings typically last from about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and Plan Commission also runs then about 2 hours to 3 hours, depending upon the amount of work that each board has. The big difference between the two is really that there are different audiences that are coming before the two boards. Zoning Board of Appeals really deals more directly with our citizens. We tend to deal more so with people who are coming in requesting variations for their individual properties, people wanting to put second stories on additions, people wanting to build a new garage, things like this. Whereas the Plan Commission deals more so with developers who are looking to build large-scale projects. Because of this, we sort of approach things very differently. I view one of the roles of the Zoning Board of Appeals is to help educate citizens in how the zoning process works and why we are here and what we do for them and how we make everything work. One of the biggest issues that I've seen really for ZBA is an issue of having 4 votes for any project to occur or to pass. But I believe that the problems that we've had with that are related to individual persons and not a systemic problem. Both of our boards are fully staffed and fully functioning, and I would encourage you to re-examine the plan to put the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals together into one commission. I hope Council doesn't mind me saying this, but in talking to him just a few minutes ago, he specifically said that at many conferences it is pointed out that Evanston has it right by having the two committees separate as opposed to one combined committee as many of our neighboring communities do. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Good evening. I'm David Garan. First, I'd like to start out with a suggestion for Alderman Rainey must wear a clip-on microphone because she refuses to speak to the public through the fixed microphone. Next.
Excuse me, but I don't think it's a refusal. I think it's that Alderman Rainey doesn't always realize she can't be heard. So. Well,
she's been reminded many times. And I hope this committee thoroughly discusses this issue and before making changes. I'd like to suggest re-releasing onto the city website if it's not there. I just learned about the League of Women Voters and the city's study on BCC. If I'm wrong, it's not on there, I'm so corrected, but please make it available. I'd like to point out that certain committees have a problem with lack of quorum, in particular the Ethics Board, and it's quite convenient for the Ethics Board not to meet, but anyway. Fifth, there are members that have expired terms on many boards, or in particular I noticed 2 boards on the Ethics Board and on the Parks and Recreation Board. Also, I suggest keeping the nomenclature that you use on the website consistent and also consistent probably in your in ordinances to also your announcements. For example, the emergency telephone system is actually the 911 emergency telephone system, Also, I noticed on this list that you've provided that you're missing many committees, such as the Foreign Fire Insurance Companies Tax Committee, which actually that needs to be put on the website to explain what that is to the people, because it's not really clear. Also, I noticed that the Lighthouse Landing Committee is not part of the list of committees that the administration has recommended. And
Yes, it is.
I must have missed that because I don't.
It's under the, and while we,
Anyway,
while we're interrupting, the Foreign Firefighters Tax Committee
Yeah.
is actually not appointed by the mayor.
Okay.
That's not a city committee.
Okay. It does. Okay. It's part of the city, but okay. And it's rather convenient that the Lakefront Committee is not on here, especially with the Harley Clark issue upon us and other attempts to take over the lakefront properties by private entities. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 4th, 2016.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So now we're going to move on to item 4. This is Boards, Committee, Commissions, Consolidation Update. I'd like to start as the chair just to sort of tee us up a little bit, and then we're going to hear from Ms. Richardson about with her staff report. This is a lot for us to deal with in a single meeting. I don't think we're going to get through it in a single meeting. And what I would like to start off with is by saying there are a number of these committees that I think are not recommended for any consolidation, and I think that we should acknowledge those and more or less take them out of the consideration. And I'll tell you, I think if everyone turns to their list, you can see the ones that are not listed for consolidation. So it would start with number 2, number 4, the Preservation Commission. Number 2 is the Evanston Arts Council. Number 4 is the Preservation Commission. 7 is the Firefighters Pension Board. 8 is the Library Board. 9 is the Liquor Control Board. And then from 12 through 27 are the ones that are also not recommended for consolidation. I think some of this we've discussed. Some of this I think are required by statute, so that, for instance, the Firefighters Pension Board really can't be combined with anything else. So what I was going to suggest to the committee is that for those, my count earlier today I think is 30, that perhaps we set those aside as not to be acknowledged, that perhaps they're too hard to figure out how to consolidate, and concentrate on the groupings that are in the memo and discuss how we want to proceed forward on potential consolidation with any of those. I have Alderman Rainey and then Alderman Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's start with number 1. Am I correct that this presentation indicates that, or implies that, were we to consolidate under Equity and Empowerment Committee, ADA, Housing and Homeless, Human Relations Commission, Mental Health, Housing and Community Development, Transportation and Parking Committee would be consolidated into the Equity and Empowerment Committee?
I believe
I
that's,
cannot believe whoever recommended this has been to many of these committee meetings, if that's what it
I
means.
recommended it, and I think I've been to all of them.
Well, I don't remember seeing you at Housing and Community Development Committee, quite frankly. I'm sure you were. I probably was absent. But
but Alderman Rainey?
Yes.
I think that I understand your concerns and questions, and I have the same ones. So, but I would, could we at least to start off agree, is it possible for us to agree on the ones that are not listed for
Oh,
consolidation?
Of course, yeah, but I
and
wasn't
then-
at the meeting, the last meeting.
Right.
So I'm trying, I did read the minutes, which were excellent. I'm just trying to get a handle on this because I'm having trouble seeing some of this, but okay.
Well, I think,
All right.
I think
thought I was the only one.
if we could have,
Okay.
no, I agree with you. Then I think what we should do is have Ms. Richardson present the staff report, which will talk about sort of the whys and thoughts behind the potential consolidation. I have a number of questions about a lot of these as well. So I do have Alderman Miller and then Alderman Holmes. So why don't we hear from them, and then perhaps if anyone else wants to talk about my idea of at least taking those, that list that I presented and putting it off to the side as not for consolidation. Alderman Miller.
Madam Chair, my questions are actually regarded to those, the ones that for taking off this side, real quick. Ms. Richardson, so we have the Chicago Main TIF Committee, and then we also have the 9/11 Emergency Telephone System Committee. Are those established by state statute or ordinance?
The main TIF committee is,
By our ordinance?
yes, our
Okay.
ordinance. Mhm.
And then the 9/11 transportation, is that by state statute?
If I'm not mistaken, that was discussed. It was either by state statute or ordinance, city ordinance.
I believe actually that's a both.
Okay.
That there's a local ordinance which implements the state statute of how the money is spent. So.
I assume the state statute says we have to have a committee that addresses this. Does it have to be a standalone committee? Do you know?
We would have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
In our discussions with Chief Eddington, it was certainly his desire that there was a certain expertise required. The group does not meet very often. It's a mix. It has aldermen who serve on the committee, and it was based on his recommendation that we left it as is.
Okay. I'm just wondering. Then we'll proceed.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Madam Chair.
Alderman Holmes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a motion to accept, I think it's 21
Is it 21?
of the
Yeah, thank you.
standalone at this time as not being consideration for consolidation. So that would- Okay.
All right. All right, there's a motion to, and that is the list that I read out loud before?
Absolutely.
Okay. All those in Alderman Braithwaite, Alderman Holmes has just made a motion that items number 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, 12 through 27.
Be removed from consideration.
Yes, be removed from consideration of consolidation
At this time.
at this time. Thank you. Thank you.
And the motion is to remove these from discussing the consolidation, to try to move the meeting along a little. Okay. It's not these, but just the. Uh, 10, we're discussing consolidation. Okay. All right, I think we can vote.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So now, Ms. Richardson, if you could provide the staff report on how staff arrived at this recommendation.
Yes. Madam Chair, committee members, as stated, my name is Kimberly Richardson, Assistant to the City Manager, and here to discuss the reduction of the board's committee and commissions proposal. Now, from the January 2016 discussion, this was not presented. The Rules Committee had asked the staff to come back at a later date with a proposal, and this is the proposal that we have come up with. Based off of the STAR community goals, this proposal would reduce the 45 current commissions to 27, as discussed in the memo. The idea was the proposal consolidates several committees and commissions into new committees, such as the Equality and Empowerment Committee, Community Service Committee, and Climate, Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And again, those 3 new committees was based off of the STAR Committee, the STAR Community Program. And from staff research and from staff discussion, this seems to be the right direction for us to begin consolidating and to provide for some type of pathway of figuring out what committees and commissions do serve the mission and purpose of our objectives for those commissions and committees, and which ones can be kind of consolidated into others that have similar purposes. Since we do seem to find the STAR community standards to be very vigorous, we thought this would be the first step into that direction. So, and we can, as discussed, you've already seen in the proposal, the combinations of the committees. And then there were some that were not part of the discussion with the STAR communities, and those committees were existing committees that will be combined due to similar mission and purpose. And those include Design and Project Review Committee, Economic Development Committee, and Plan Commission. They will stay as is, and they will be combined with additional committees' responsibilities. We've discussed this, the existing committees that will stay as is, and the committee has currently ruled on leaving these alone. And then we will have inactive committees that we will see eliminated due to either they fulfill their mission or they no longer are active. In regards to purpose, I would have to give it over to our city manager, Mr. Bobowski, to give us some more context.
Sure. And Madam Chair, members of the committee, and Ms. Richardson, maybe we can go back to the first slide, which has actually the next slide with the, there we go.
This one? Yeah.
As we were charged by the committee back in January, there was a clear feeling that the number of boards and commissions that we had was a number that was perhaps a little bit unwieldy. And as the staff report mentions, it was actually Catherine Hurley and Jennifer Lassick who came to me and said, you know, if we're trying to look at how we do business and how we want to maybe streamline some of this, why not look at the areas that we evaluate ourselves up with for the STAR Community Project? So the first, equity and empowerment. Absolutely, there's a lot of stuff here. But I think it helps the council maybe take a pause as to, if you look at what is up here, how are we addressing the issues that are included there? If you look at the Housing and Community Development Act Committee and the Mental Health Board, both those groups are very heavy into the evaluation of project proposals, funding requirements, a number of meetings that occur throughout the year to do that. This council has directed that those 2 groups work more closely together, and I think this will be the 3rd year of that process, and I think for most reports is a positive, and it is allowing us as a city to really look at how resources are being expended. I think from staff's perspective, though, there are policy questions that still are not being aired at either of those committees or really anywhere else in our board and committee system. How are we helping people? How are we making sure people get the services that we need? How can we make sure that those services are equitable? So of that group for under equity and empowerment, mental health and housing and community development, very busy, but there are probably some policy issues that are not being discussed. The ADA Advisory Committee is something that the City Council implemented since my time here, so my guess is that that was in 2010 or 2011 because we did not have a way to have a citizen group evaluate issues not only for the city government facilities but also broader than that. That group has really not gained traction. We've tried to get it together. It's been difficult to have consistent meetings. The Housing and Homelessness Commission, once they had the City Council approve their report on homelessness and reconfigured themselves. They have been, I think, certainly considering lots of issues, but I'm not sure that they have brought any to the fore, and certainly Alderman Tendam, who serves on that group, is better to speak to that than I am. And then the Human Relations Commission, again, another group really focused on what we can do to move the community forward, to deal with issues really of equity and empowerment more than maybe any of the groups up there, through Oscar Murillo's efforts, through Jonathan Williams Kinsel's efforts before then. I think we're beginning to see some progress there. But when you look at that group of 6 together, they share a lot of commonality. And, my hope is that the council will have a discussion as to how best to deal with issues of equity and empowerment. Perhaps it's one group that deals with funding and one group that deals with policy. So maybe there's 2 groups versus one group here. So that was, Madam Chair, the thinking in very broad strokes on the first committee. Next, Kimberly. Community Services Committee. Really, the Parks and Recreation Board does a lot of work, and certainly has over the last couple of years especially, work on policy issues dealing with recreation. The Committee on Public Place Names meets only as needed. The Commission on Aging, again, a very active group. And then the Animal Welfare Board, again, one of the newer groups, and they meet now quarterly. All of these, I think, really fall into community services, the recreation portion of the Parks and Rec Board. By taking parks and having that be part of the natural resources group, I think allows for a greater 30,000-foot look at what we're doing with our parks as places to gather. I think this board, the Community Services Committee, would continue to focus on services, would continue to focus on facilities. The Commission on Aging, I think we have to come to grips with where do our senior programs fit. Should they be standalone? Should they be integrated more into what we're doing? Our age-friendly task force, I think, has done an excellent job of doing that. And then finally, the Animal Welfare Board, if the council is looking to consolidate, this group meets quarterly. They review reports from the Evanston Animal Shelter Association, and I think clearly the work of that board could be contained into this Community Services Committee. The Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources Committee, I think, kind of speaks for itself. The Environment Board, very engaged. The Utilities Commission, very engaged. The Lat Arboretum Committee and the Lighthouse Landing Complex Committee, perhaps less so on issues. And then if you were to take the parks piece of the Parks and Recreation Board, I think then gives you a broad look at the issues of climate, energy, and natural resources. The Utilities Commission has looked, started as the Electrical Commission, if you recall, was broadened because we really had no group looking at our water and sewer utilities. I think there's a lot to be said for this combination, and I think the workload associated with this group probably also makes sense. Those are, I think, the main 3. Again, Madam Chair, members of the committee, the City Council, this committee asked us to take a look at a number that was 45, 47 groups and come up with something that was a little bit more manageable. This is a difficult task, one that this council has grappled with. I'll also mention representatives from the League of Women Voters are here. We had an opportunity to meet with representatives a couple of weeks ago with an initial draft of this, and there's a communication in your packet from the League, I think generally saying that this seems like it's a reasonable path. Without endorsing anything, I think the letter said it seemed like it was a reasonable path to continue to go down. So the next couple, if you could go to the next slide, Design and Project Review and Sign Review and Appeals Board. Again, I think the land use committees really require a separate discussion, and that would include the Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. Clearly, if we were to combine the Design and Project Review with the Sign and Review Board or the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals, really that's a whole process. It's not a matter of taking the existing processes and sort of merging them together. I think that if this is something that the committee and the City Council wishes to pursue, it would take a wholesale review of our land use approval processes. I think, as the speakers have said, to just consolidate the workload of the 2, especially the Plan Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, doesn't make any sense, but there may be an opportunity for some streamlining. Then finally, the Economic Development Committee, if the council would agree that transportation goes more holistically looking at equity and empowerment, that leaves the parking piece of this. This committee has not met very often over the last year or 2, and often does meet on parking issues. I think that parking has a lot to do with economic development and creating jobs. Many of the incentives that we provided businesses to come in the last year really have been involving parking. So I don't think it's an unreasonable thing that parking would be a part of that. The Taxi Cab Advisory Commission is largely dormant, but it's still on the books. And I think would make sense to include in economic development. Then finally, the Minority Women in Evanston Business Enterprise Committee deals with job creation, and I think that's a natural combination with the Economic Development Committee. Next slide. I think
That's
maybe
it. Now complete the slides for combining the additional.
and then the rest of the council's already dealt with.
Correct.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is meant to be the first sort of offer to you to begin discussion, and it was never, of course, intended to be a final recommendation. I feel it's very important that once the council comes up with a framework that you think may make sense, I think it's important to go back to the boards and commissions. We have not done that. The only consultation we did, as I'd indicated in January, I thought it was important to bring the League of Women Voters involved with that. So we did have a consultation with them, and would certainly look to do that. And if I may just digress for a moment, the fire department is dealing with some breaking news right now. There's a brush fire adjacent to the Davis Street Metro station. Metro has stopped trains in both directions in order for the Evanston Fire Department to deal with the brush fire. We have no other details. We don't have any details of injuries, but we do know that staff is working diligently. I've asked Mr. Lyons to go to the scene to provide additional information and assistance to us, but the trains, Metro has stopped the Metro North line in both directions while we deal with that.
All right, thank you.
Metro's been cleared.
I'm sorry?
Metro has been cleared.
Metro,
Has been cleared? Okay.
okay. Thank you, Alderman Rainey. Didn't know we had that much brush near there.
I didn't either, and that's why it was a little concerning to me, because if there was fire, there's a lot of other things that's
Right.
adjacent
No,
to the
is this a
Davis Street
treetop?
station.
No, we shouldn't say that. Alderman Tendem.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Richardson.
Thank you.
I haven't discussed this much with staff or anybody else, but it seems to me what we're doing here is just shuffling things around, and I don't disagree the where the pockets or the places things have been put, but it seems to me that we're just creating subcommittees that will, or boards that will really, in all honesty, don't really reduce the number of meetings or actual groups that get together. And there are a few that I would comment further on, but my general feeling is that we're really just shuffling things around here.
Thank you. Alderman Nair.
Thank you, Chairman. The one that I would like to promote combining is the Environment Board and the Lad Arboretum Committee. I had not been replacing people as they retired from those committees, so that we would have a smaller group and that everyone could remain if we decided to combine them, and I think they're relatively logical to combine. You could include the Lighthouse Landing, but it's kind of a specifically, I would propose combining the Environment Board and the Lad Arboretum.
Would you like to
Well, that got a real round of applause. Sure, I'll make that motion.
All right. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. Alderman Rainey has seconded the motion. I have Alderman Rainey and Alderman Miller. So Alderman Rainey, do you want to go first?
I don't want to speak to that. I just think it makes the most sense of all of these, probably.
Okay. Alderman Miller?
And you mean really combining them?
Yeah.
Not just having a subcommittee?
No. I think those two you could really combine.
Absolutely, I agree.
I'd like to speak to the larger issue, not the specific motion, so.
Okay. Well, shall we vote on the motion then first, and then do you want to speak to the larger issue? Okay. So all those in favor of combining the Environment Board and the Lad Arboretum Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
And then I would like to say one more thing. The
Yes, go right ahead.
Utilities Commission has always been difficult. You have to have people with specific special knowledge. So I think that probably should remain its own
Second.
committee.
Second.
All right. has been a motion to maintain the Utilities Commission as a separate commission due to its requirements of expertise, and it's been seconded. Any discussion? Alderman Miller.
Well, as far as those requirements, they're part of our ordinance as well. Like this, do we have to have, set by state law or some other larger governing body, a utilities commission with specific qualifications? Mr. Manager, you're not shaking your head. So, I mean, how often are they meeting? What are they, discussing, et cetera? I mean, how is the committee actually working?
Madam Chair, Alderman Miller, the committee meets monthly. They have been largely focused on energy issues. They asked the City Council to have staff do an energy audit of various facilities, and so that is underway. They mostly deal with energy and environment issues. When the ComEd franchise comes up every 5 years, they provide guidance to council, but other than that, they are very focused on energy and environment issues.
If the expertise is an issue, I'm sure we can find people that are interested in these types of issues in the community, both the environment and the utility side of things. And if we just can't fulfill the ordinance requirements, then I think we can change the ordinance, and we can change the committee as well. So, I mean, I would think that we could have a good group of knowledgeable people that would actually really cherish these ideas and embrace them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a separate committee.
Alderman Rainey.
Well, those are the kind of people that are on the Utility Commission. And furthermore, the Utility Commission used to be something else, and we combined other issues with them. And, they're probably, I don't want to diss any other committee, but among the highly skilled members of this community are serving on that committee. And we don't have any trouble having them meet or resolving issues or presenting them to us. So I don't understand. Do you think that we don't have the right people on the committee? I wasn't sure of your comment.
No, I'm not saying that we have the right people on the committee. I'm just saying I think I'm in favor of consolidation in general. I think having this many committees is difficult for both the public and for us to keep track of what's going on. And we have active committees, but I think honestly that I'm just in favor of consolidation for better process, more efficiency, effectiveness, et cetera.
My advice would be for you to attend one of their meetings. It's absolutely.
I sit on 9 or 10 different committees. I attend many different ones, and it's too much.
To consolidate for consolidated purposes is absolutely folly.
No, it's for efficiency.
But
and it's for effective use of staff resources.
I'm sure you know better. Thank you.
All right, I have Alderman Ravel.
Just to add a little bit more about the Utilities Commission, they've been very involved the last year, I believe, on the energy benchmarking ordinance, which is about to come to the council in another month or two. And that has not only involved members of the Utility Commission itself, but also a big working group. And they do have really specialized expertise. And I go to a lot of meetings with the folks who are on the Environment Board and the Land Arboretum Committee, and they have also great expertise, but in a completely different area in terms of our natural environment. So I'm certainly sympathetic to the desire to have consolidation and greater efficiency, but I don't think this is the place that we can do that.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Alderman Nguyen. I'd also like to make a motion to remove the MWEBE committee from...
I think we have a motion on the floor right now about the Utilities Commission.
We're speaking to that motion? Then I will wait. I can just call the question.
I'm not sure, was there a second to that?
Yes, Alderman Rainey, you seconded it, right, didn't you? Yes.
Can I call the question?
Real quick, too, about this issue, and there's no reason why the current members of the Utilities Commission can't sit on the new natural resources, it's the Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources Committee as well. We can keep that expertise and do it more efficiently.
I think the question has been called as to whether to maintain the Utilities Commission as it exists at this time. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. All right, thank you. How many ayes are here? Okay. Alderman Braithwaite now.
Thank you very much, Alderman Nguyen. I guess I'll preface my motion with, I think this past year, thanks to the hard work of our staff, the MWEBE committee has made some tremendous strides. We added Mark Tendem Alderman Tendem a year ago, and then more recently Alderman Miller. We've done an excellent job with compliancy. Workforce development continues to be a priority for our mayor, in addition to the city council. We've used the newly collected fines to recycle, to do training, and in addition to that, we do a Procurement 101 event. And so I'm really proud of the work that the committee, staff, and volunteers has done, and I'd like to see that work continue independently of independently of the Economic Development Committee. So my motion is to remove that and allow it to stay as a standing committee.
Alderman Tendem.
I would agree with Alderman Braithwaite. This committee, I mean, I was only on it as the changes were about to happen, and they certainly did happen. It's still finding its place. It's still developing, but new staff and sort of a recharged committee have brought a lot of energy, and Marty Lyons has had great oversight of this group. So it has been, I think I worry that, tucked away under economic development, it's going to get stymied again, that it really does deserve some time to grow. Maybe at some point it does become part of economic development. It certainly would fit in there. But I would agree with Alderman Braithwaite. I can certainly accept Taxi Cab Advisory Commission and parking, especially. I'm the one that's always complaining about parking. Those I do think are economic development issues that we need to talk about in a broader sense. So my point is keeping them there, but letting the MWEBE stand on its own for a little longer.
All right. Any other discussion on this? All those in favor of maintaining the MWEBE committee as it currently exists, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Alderman Rainey.
Not about including or excluding any specific group here, but could you or the city manager explain, because I do believe that economic development, parking, and taxi cab could be combined. How would that look in terms of meeting and dealing with issues? How does it look?
I'll let the city manager explain.
Madam Chair, Alderman Rainey, well, the Taxi Cab Advisory Commission has not met in several years. So my sense is that at some point the city of Evanston will have to come to grips with issues of taxi cab and shared ride proprietors. We are not at that point. So when that comes to pass, I think then that would be under the purview of the Economic Development Committee. Regarding parking issues, it's usually transactional things, that it's either contracts that then are approved by the committee and then move on to the full city council for its consideration. There's been signage issues that have been discussed, but there's a lot of contractual things, so I would think that it could be part of a consent calendar for the Economic Development Committee. Certainly the workload dealing with parking issues, I don't think, and Alderman Nguyen is longtime chair of the Transportation Parking Committee, can speak to it better than I can, but I don't imagine that would have a significant impact on the Economic Development Committee.
Will the members of both committee, and I know in some cases we're the same people, will they combine and meet as a group, or will, like somebody said,
I think, Alderman Rainey, members of the committee, if this is something you feel will make sense, then I would ask that staff be directed to come back at a future meeting with a proposal as to how that combination would actually happen. I think there's also then the transportation component of transportation and parking, and I hope that finds a home somewhere else, so that there's a broader discussion of mobility transportation issues, and perhaps ultimately there is some sort of equity and empowerment committee, perhaps not with all the component parts as was originally presented, but perhaps that would then land there with some other policy pieces.
So in the case of parks and recreation and transportation and parking, we've actually taken two committees and made four. So
Well, and I think as this is evolving, clearly, my sense from the discussion of the council, if the Environment Board and the Lat Arboretum is going to be considered, and the Utility Commission stands alone, then there's no real Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources Committee. So then I think the issue of taking Parks and Recreation out, so maybe then it's a matter of taking Parks and Recreation and adding to it the Animal Welfare Board, the Committee on Public Place Names, and perhaps there's then a separate discussion on the Commission on Aging. So I think it's as pieces are coming out of the puzzle, I think the puzzle has to be readjusted a little bit.
That makes sense, what you just stated.
Yeah.
I
I'd like to speak to the issue of the parking and economic development. I have been the chair, and I've been on the committee for the entire time I've been on the city council. They are critical issues to quality of life. During the time we've been on the council, I've been on it, we've built 2 parking garages. And so our activity has been much more intense in the past in terms of analyzing and then working on the design and how the parking garages would work. But I do think it would fit under the Economic Development Committee. Part of what we talk about a lot is we want to hear from the retail community and the Chamber of Commerce on any changes that we make and how that promotes economic development here in the city. So I do think that makes sense. The transportation piece, I think, is a really important committee that needs to, as I said, as Mark was saying, it just needs time to grow. I think it's without question the interest in mass transit and bicycling and how vehicles move through our city definitely needs to be on a committee and on an agenda that's regularly discussed. But transportation and parking don't always necessarily fit together. All right, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen. The one...
I'm sorry, Alderman Braithwaite. I had Alderman Miller.
Oh, please. No, please. I can wait.
I just kind of moving back, I don't know what line of questioning, because we're going to be all over the place in a sense. What the city manager was saying about Parks and Recreation, that remaining committee, so we have, what's remaining in the Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources that we haven't decided in a sense is the Environment Board and the Parks and Recreation Board, parks only. Is that correct, what you were saying?
So I think Alderman Miller, for example, the Parks and Recreation could continue as is. You could add then under them the Animal Welfare Board.
Well, yeah, I think you just take the Parks and Recreation, keep it, and make it Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, and then we still haven't done. The Environment Board has not been combined. Sorry, I'm trying to keep track.
No, it has been with the Lat Arboretum.
Okay, so the Lighthouse and Landing Complex we can just make into 3. So it's Park, Recreations, Community Services. You have all those. Animal Welfare Board, Commission on Aging, Committee on Public Place Names, and then both sides of the Parks and Recreation Board, and then add the Lighthouse Landing Complex Committee.
Alderman Miller, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. I would move to do so if everyone was taking notes. So in essence, I would move to we'll call it number 3, the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Committee. Have both Parks and Recreation boards that are now split in this proposal, and then also add the Lighthouse Landing Complex Committee there.
And the Animal Welfare Board?
Right, so everything under 3 would stay the same.
Commission on Aging?
Right. We have the Community Services Department that is under, it's a Park, Recreation, and Community Service. In a sense, this would kind of have all those functions in one body that are already in one department.
All right, Mayor Tisdall.
I guess I want to know if you're proposing that the Lighthouse Landing Complex Committee would be part of a bigger committee. I think it would be what Alderman Tendem said. It would end up as a subcommittee. That used to be a very difficult area. Years ago when Steve Engelman was the alderman, he created this committee. And what they do is they meet 4 times a year, but they discuss issues that crop up. Its neighbors, the alderman, which would be Alderman Revelle, Paul D'Agostino comes, and the taxing district.
So Actually, I have it here, if I may. It's the, in addition to city staff, it's representatives from the Garden Club of Evanston. There's neighborhood representatives and Mr. Terrace, the executive director of the Lighthouse Park District.
So it's a pretty specific, the meetings, it would seem odd to drag them through a whole huge committee meeting when they meet 4 times a year and they discuss if a tree is falling over or if the art center, which used to be there, was planning an event or that sort of thing. If we ever come to some decision on the Carly Clark Mansion, we may not really need that committee anymore. But as of the way that it is now, it would be, from my perspective, it would be hard to imagine them sitting through longer committee meetings, and they meet in the middle of the day, too.
I'll just add, as a member of the Animal Welfare Board, fairly recent, that's a really particular group of people who have very specific interests, who are very knowledgeable, and they're now only meeting quarterly, and I also think that they may not have a broader interest in Parks and Recreation, and you do want people who are interested in the broader interests of Parks and Recreation. I think, as the mayor has said about Lighthouse Landing, you get people because they are very interested in that specific issue. I would remove those. I don't think they belong in that, because Parks and Recreation is a big topic, and there are people who want to discuss that larger topic. But these are the people who serve on these committees. They're intensely interested in that discrete topic. Oh, all right. Now I've lost track. Let's see. Alderman Holmes, and then Alderman Tendam.
I first wanted to agree with Alderman Miller in terms of making the Park Recreation Community Services Committee. I think that is the broader name. And then I wanted to ask, I think that if the Committee on Public Names is under there and the Commission on Aging remains there, that, and the animal, I think if committees are only meeting 3 and 4 times a year, it's almost like a subcommittee anyway. And since we don't yet know how the staff is going to propose that these function, that we probably leave it there for now and wait for them to come back with telling us their vision for how these broader groups would function. Because, that to me that's the place for them, is under the Parks and Rec and Community Services. You have to have Community Services in there in order for it to fit.
Okay, Alderman Tendam.
I suppose, with community services, the Commission on Aging would be appropriate, although I'm thinking it could also fit under equity and empowerment, since that deals with a lot of issues of certain groups within the community. And I also don't know, I think they also might meet during more reasonable hours.
But that's the people. We can't think of how the people are now. We just have to think of what things are going to be in the future.
But
I do think it's. I don't want to say it's ADA. It is. I think, I don't know. It could fit either place in my mind. But if we're concerned about making the community services more about Parks and Rec oriented, then maybe the Commission on Aging would get more attention under empowerment or equity.
I have Alderman Rainey, and then the mayor.
Madam Chairman, I was going to recommend to remove the Commission on Aging from the Parks and Community Services and put it under number 1, equity and empowerment. And then when we get to there, we can discuss it. But it really, it really belongs there, because there's more to the Commission on Aging than, recreation and, classwork and things like that. And not only that, but housing and community development we deal with many aging issues, senior issues.
Okay.
As does mental health, et cetera. So I would make that motion. I'm not sure where we are.
I think we have to. I'm realizing that.
I'll pass. Let's figure out where we are.
All right, we need to figure out where we are. I don't believe we have a motion on the floor right now.
I think
just
Alderman,
made
no, well, I think Alderman Tindem did before
Okay.
you did, because you just really recommended the same thing he did.
All right.
Okay, so
could
the
second
motion
that.
right now is, the motion is to move the Commission on Aging to under the category of number 1, Equity and Empowerment Committee. All right.
That was a motion.
Okay, all right, there is a second. So all those in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then, Mayor Tisdall, did you have a motion on the lighthouse landing?
I don't think I made a motion, but I will make a motion that it stay a solo committee
That meets quarterly.
that meets quarterly.
Second.
And eventually, we may be able to stop having it depending on what happens in that area.
Okay. All right, was there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Alderman Miller.
So then that leaves the Parks and Recreation Board and the Environment Board within that Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources Committee.
I'm sorry, could you, I
Sorry.
couldn't quite hear you.
Within there's 2 remaining in number 6, which is the Environment Board and Parks and Recreation Board. The Environment Board, as the mayor said,
Right, the Environment Board we combined with Loud Arboretum.
oh, is that right? Okay,
Yes,
so that's a
we did that.
standalone, maybe that's left over in Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources
Right.
then.
And then Lighthouse Landing, we've just left because it's a specific topic.
Okay, and the utilities individual, but I would just move the Park and Recreations Board function to the Community Services Committee, so just call it the Parks and Recreation and Community Services Committee.
So I think, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think that animal welfare is up in the air.
Right.
If that should be part of this or not. Committee on Public Place Names is up in the air if this should be part of it or not. So those, I think, are 2 questions. So if you wish to include them as part of Parks, Recreation, Community Services or not.
I think so.
Well, I would move, because they do meet quarterly, I would move the Animal Welfare Board, which meets quarterly, remain as it is. They're relatively new with the new Evanston Animal Shelter. Perhaps in the future they could be moved into Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, but I think for now they have a very, very strong group of volunteers who are very interested in that.
Second.
So let me just restate my motion so we can clean up this committee, if you would. So I would move it would be the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Committee, and you'd have the Animal Welfare Board separate as a standalone committee. And then everything else is remaining under Parks, Recreation, and Community Services.
So really just the Committee on Public Place
Just
Names.
a committee on public naming.
Well, and
So the
Parks and
thing is
Recreation
that.
Board as well. So the Commission on Aging, are we separating that? Is that?
Yeah, they already
okay.
moved that up to.
Oh, that moved to Equity and Empowerment.
Okay, so
Start over
we're,
and say it one more time.
Right, I'm
these-
just trying to figure out. Right. Here's my motion.
well, I think I made the motion on the Welfare Board.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, okay.
Can we act on that?
Second.
And then,
I second
okay.
that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, Alderman Braithwaite, I think we all know where you're going. Go ahead.
Okay, so now my motion would
Not
be
Braithwaite. I looked at you and I turned my head. Okay.
it would be the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Committee, and that would just have the Parks and Recreation Board, both functions, and the Committee on Public Place Names.
Second.
Okay, that's my motion.
All right. Any more discussion on that? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, so the Equity and Empowerment Committee, I think there's the issue of the Mental Health Board and the Housing and Community Development Act Committee, that if, the City Council, I think, has been moving to have those 2 groups work more closely together. My sense is it's probably time for that moving to be completed and to have those groups combined. If that were the case, then that leaves you with the transportation component of transportation and parking. It leaves you with the Commission on Aging, the Human Relations Commission, the Housing and Homelessness Commission, and the ADA Advisory Committee. Given the current dockets of those groups, there's probably a new group there. If you were to merge mental health and housing and community development, then the remainder of those perhaps becomes your Equity and Empowerment Committee.
So that would be the ADA, and the Equity and Empowerment would be ADA Advisory, Housing and Homelessness, Human Relations, Commission on Aging, and Transportation.
Yes, that would be my proposal to the committee.
Alderman Rainey.
Well, we did work with mental health last few meetings, and I think it worked out fine. I don't know, has mental health been talked to about combining with us, or?
In my conversations, Alderman Rainey, they do not believe that is the path to go, and they have not felt that that's been the path through the city council's couple of years of discussions, that they feel that they have a separate, distinct role, separate from the CDBG committee, separate from any other group. And so they have been very, I think, some longtime members have been very reluctant.
Well, I must say, I had never been to a mental health board meeting recently until we started meeting together, and I found it fascinating. And I think that we could both learn from each other. We do a lot of work that results in a spillover for them, and I would hope that they felt that our work was very important as well. The issue, of course, comes in the funding, because they have a funding direction that is different from ours in terms of the source. And so I don't know how that would work. But like you say, as we move on, we'll figure out how to flesh it.
And I think, Alderman Rainey, members of the committee, one of the struggles that I've had as your city manager is that the money that the Mental Health Board has is the money that is ultimately allocated by the Evanston City Council. It is not standalone. It is not segregated. It is general fund money that could be spent on streets or police officers or parks, but has been a community value of Evanston that it's important to spend that $800,000 roughly annually. And I think that the leveraging of the CDBG funds with that $800,000 of general fund dollars only makes Evanston stronger. And having one group make those decisions, in my sense, over the last several years has been, I think, an obvious choice.
And I think that is exactly the reason why the Mental Health Board is a little resistant, probably. However, I would be willing to help make it work and see.
All right, Alderman Miller and then Alderman Tendam.
So I'd like to make an official motion to combine the Mental Health Board and Housing and Community Development Act Committee as a separate standalone committee. And I just would like to say my reasoning as well is I know staff is, between these two processes, these are two large grant processes where we have lots of moving pieces, and they're two separate, external processes. And I really do believe that we can create a better process for our staff, but also for the general public, is having one combined process to moving forward in this regard. So I'd move to combine those two as a separate standalone committee.
Second.
All right. Then I have Alderman Tendam.
And I have
Should we entertain that motion or discuss that motion?
I believe that several people might
I
want to
don't
speak.
need to
I'm not-
speak to that. I was going to make another.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak to that.
All right,
I wanna
okay,
speak
so
to
then,
that.
Alderman Holmes, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I would like to speak to that. The Housing and Community Development Service, Act Committee has very different guidelines from HUD. And I'm very worried about the combination or combining those two in terms of human services for the community, because everything won't fit under the HUD guidelines. And I'm having a difficult time with this now as we begin to say how we're going to combine or not combine. I'm content to leave them as they are until we get some direction from staff in terms of how they figure this is going to, what the process is going to be. I'm getting real confused because I thought the whole purpose was for efficiency, which is I'm fine with, but I need to know how it's going to work before I can really make any more commitments. But I think that we have to look very carefully at combining those, I want to call them human services dollars rather than, or the mental health funds, and because we no longer even have that act anymore. Because it's a real different focus, and we cannot apply if this goes under the CDGB. It's like they would have to abide by the HUD rules, I would assume.
Oh, no.
Okay, well, I just need to hear how these are going to function before we do any more combining, for my hearing anyway.
Okay, I have Alderman Miller and then Alderman Rainey.
So I see it as, right now for CDBG funding, we already have programmatic funding, we have capital funding, and then we kind of have our own internal funding we use it for. I think of this as a subset of that. And I would love to see, because I know staff, this is two separate hearing processes that they have for, the two pots of money in a sense, two different committees, and that's hours and hours and hours of, of hearings. If we could combine all that together and people can apply for the the mental health funding, I think it'd be a greater efficiency in that sense. So I just see this as kind of like, we already have allocations for those three other areas. This is just another allocation. Now it's a separate pot of money, I understand, but I mean, in the sense of the application process, it just be like that.
It's an application process now. You have to to apply in order to get the funds.
Right, but as a result of that, though, we just have an extended, process because of these two pots of money to get, they're operating on separate tracks.
Okay, I thought they had one big Super Saturday meeting for the mental health funds, and it may be two. That's all. I mean, I've been out of the business for a while, but I mean, it's been sort of condensed to that for a long, long time. So it's not,
Right, but I mean, that's one process, and then at the same time, we have the Housing Community Development Act process as well.
Which we cannot change because that is by federal law, so we're going to meet.
No, and I agree with that. I'm saying, but what we can do is combine. Again, if you have applicants applying for this fund, they're just applying for a different fund in a sense. Like it's like a similar of the four, or one of the four, and then the process itself. We don't need to have multiple meetings to have all this happen together. We can have hearings, staff can review and vet applications, and then move forward, because that's essentially what happens going forward, is saying what are responsive and what are not to the applicant process, and then we have these hearings, and the full committee of the combined committees, I should say, vets them.
Perhaps we don't need to decide this evening. Perhaps we need to have staff come back and have a little bit more detailed explanation of this.
Of the process. That's all I'm asking for.
I'm sorry, Alderman Rainey and then Alderman Tandem.
I think I don't have a problem combining them. I can see how it can work. Mental health cannot commingle housing and community development money with their money, and I mean, it seems like maybe the city manager is suggesting that perhaps we could subsidize to some extent our programs in community development with some mental health, or combine them somehow. However, you have to remember that housing and community development money, to a great extent, is devoted to certain target areas. It's not just spread out all over, and it's very focused money. Lately, we've had a really difficult time on the committee because so many of the neighborhood improvement type programs have been eliminated. We used to have the security program, we used to have the fencing program, which people in the neighborhoods could actually see how we were spending the money. I mean, it's just very focused programs, and we can't do that anymore. If we build something that's over a certain amount of money, we have to go by Davis-Bacon. Mental health doesn't have to do that kind of thing. So there are restrictions. There are restrictions, and our committees are formed very specifically from basically the neighborhood, the wards where the target areas are, and by citizen members who are in the target areas. So this is another one of those things where I really can't envision how the committee is going to look unless one becomes subservient to the other as a subcommittee. And I don't think either of our committees want to become that way. So the only problem I'm having with all of this is to see how it's going to work, how it's going to work people-wise, membership-wise.
Well,
I'm not worried about the money because it is very separate, Alderman Holmes. I know, but it's could be confusing.
Well, I do think we are at the, not to put pressure on us, but we are at the 1 hour mark. But, and I see the mayor and Alderman Miller. And we've accomplished an enormous amount.
Historic.
Yes, right. I think this has been one of the most productive Rules Committee meetings that we've had in a long, long time. My suggestion as the chair would be that on this one, which is a tougher one for members of the committee, that perhaps we wait and get more information from staff. Okay, I don't know who turned on their light first. I'm going to go with the mayor, then Alderman Miller, then Alderman Tendem, then Alderman Rainey. Okay.
Well, I didn't want to lose sight of Mr. Rogers and his recommendation that we do not combine the Plan Commission and the ZBA, and that's a recommendation with which I agree.
Right.
Just before we move on that.
But I agree with that. Let's let that be our last motion. Let's deal with Mental Health Board and CDBG right now. I would recommend that Alderman Miller, perhaps you withdraw your motion for the time being, and we get our staff report so that we wait and hear back about how this will work, how this combined committee would work.
And that's fine. Let me put another thing out there for staff to discuss. In a sense, another option, if we're worried about the CDBG process and we're following that, I think another option is moving the Mental Health Board under our Human Services Committee. In essence, the Mental Health Board reports to the Human Service Committee with their allocations, and I think staff should look at that as well.
And that's the way it currently goes. So
I'm sorry?
That's what it's currently
That's the way it currently
Right,
works.
but I mean, taking the Mental Health Board functions and giving them to Human Services, that's what I would say is the consolidation. No.
Okay.
Apparently that's
All right.
not popular either.
Okay, no.
Well, then I'll withdraw my motion, but I think given these two processes, to have them separate is still inefficient and ineffective.
Okay. I think that we should have the staff, we've made huge strides here. I think we should have the staff tell us what we've done first, and then come back to us. I mean, I have so many arrows leading to so many places here. And then I think if the staff can come back to us with some type of working blueprint of how that combination of the Mental Health Board and Housing and Community Development Act Committee can work, that would be good at the next Rules Committee meeting.
Set a date of that before you go.
And we will set a date for that in just a minute. But now I'm going to call on the mayor to make the motion that she was going to about the Plan Commission. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Tendem.
Yeah, I do have one more comment regarding Housing and Homelessness Commission. This was created rather recently in terms of combining the two and putting a lot of emphasis on homelessness. I feel this committee has a room to grow and really should be, I don't know if it needs to be a separate from equity and empowerment, but it certainly is charting its own course, bringing and talking about further amendments to our inclusionary ordinance, and also dealing with a really complex funding apparatus that I don't even quite understand unless it's explained to me, and it sort of it changes. Now, we're also looking at administration change in Washington, and that too could change funding. And so I think this. I want to strengthen that committee rather than put it as a subcommittee, but I don't really care where it is. I just think it needs to have a lot of attention and has room to grow. So if the staff could give us some insight on how they feel that committee can really be strengthened, that would be helpful.
And Madam Chair, Alderman Tendem, I think if we could come back with what a vision of an equity empowerment committee would look like, including ADA, human relations, housing, community development, and transportation, my sense is the housing and homelessness becomes the driver of that, and these other committees kind of come along with that. So I think, Alderman Tendem, we could come up with something that would make a lot of sense. So if you give us a little time, we can work on that.
All right. Mayor Tisdall and then Alderman Rainey.
I want to speak to the motion. I just want to comment on the CD committee. I would like the courtesy of having the CD committee meet at its next meeting and discuss this, because we've never discussed it. And so I would like that opportunity.
Well, I think we aren't going to have a rule. When is the next CD committee? We probably aren't going to have a
or the
Rules Committee
third
meeting.
Tuesday of every month.
All right. Well, our next Rules Committee would be after that.
The point I'm making is I don't want staff to come back with us with a set, explanation of how it's going to work. I would like the committee to have a discussion about how it's going to work, if they think it should at all.
Okay. All right. Now, Mayor Tisdall.
Thank you. I move that the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals remain separate.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I'm going to suggest that we adjourn at this point, and then find out what we've done. Because I think I think we've done a lot of good things here, and I think we've had a very useful discussion about things that should remain the same.
And Madam Chair, may I suggest then, given the date of the next Housing Community Development Act Committee, that we would then have a Rules Committee meeting on the third Monday of May?
Point of order, though. We still have one more item of business, too.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Okay.
know that, yeah.
So, Madam Chair, May 16, we do 6 o'clock with a 7 o'clock council meeting
Yes.
on May 16th.
Okay, May 16th will be our next Rules Committee meeting. And we do have item number 5, which is approval of revised aldermanic membership / chair schedule. Do we have a motion regarding that?
Move approval. Second.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes, I have a question. Am I ever going to chair another committee? From what I saw, my last chairmanship was sometime in 2014, and the only other time was in 2013.
Which committee?
Any.
I mean, it just seems like I don't, I'm not complaining.
We met about
I
that.
just don't understand the
didn't get the memo?
process.
I think, Alderman Rainey, the more senior that we are, the tendency is that we've served both our rotations earlier in the.
But also, new people coming on, instead of being put on the bottom, get slid into the previous person. I don't know.
I'm serving on my first committee now. P&D is the very first committee I'm serving on. So, I
just wanted to know how we did it, how we do it.
All right, can the staff perhaps?
Alderman Nguyen,
Right.
you were absolutely correct when the allocation
I
was
see
made,
you.
when the council was seated. If you look on page 12 of your packet, for example, Alderman Rainey served as the Chair of Administration of Public Works from June 2013 to March 2014, so that was over 2 years ago. So it is, all the Rainey, Holmes, Nguyen all served in the first part of this 4-year term. So that's why. And Alderman Holmes has served throughout those 4 years in various
Right,
capacities.
right. That's right. Yes.
People have left at the wrong time for Alderman
Well,
Holmes.
and I think the way that we did it in the prior council was we did 2 rotations, and I think that got to be very complex with making sure that people did not overlap. So we wanted to spread out Alderman Holmes' chairmanships over the entire 4 years. So she didn't have double duty. So, okay. All right. So we have, do we have a motion with regard to this? Can we have a motion regarding
Move
the?
approval.
All right, Madam Chair, just real quick, clarification on the vacancy on economic development. Is that Alderman Braithwaite? I just want to make sure it's clear in the record as well.
Yes, it is.
Okay, because it's just vacant in the backup. So just, there's 7 aldermen, and Alderman Braithwaite is what's listed as vacant. That's correct?
I'm looking for it right now.
As amended, then.
Okay,
So
I
it
mean, we
appears
can move to
twice on
amend it.
page 12 and then on page 13.
Right.
So vacant under economic development should be Alderman Braithwaite.
Okay, just clarification about that.
All right, thank you. Yes.
on the committee.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But only if I have your permission.
I thought you were becoming chairman.
No, but I mean, I wanted, because
I'm not gonna be
it
chair
said
of it.
saying vacant, I thought, wait a minute, he's not on the committee, he's coming on to the committee.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. With that, I believe we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.